Hello and welcome. You are about to watch a whole school college approach to wellbeing for all staff as part of the Wellbeing Education Resilience Programme. We'd like to draw your attention to the Face COVID video. If you haven't already seen it, it'll be great to take 5 minutes of your time to have a look at this at some point. It gives a great overview of how to support wellbeing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can click on the link below when the PowerPoint presentation is in slideshow mode.
This is the second video in the Watch element of the WER programme. It focuses on the whole school approach. There may be key concepts that are touched upon very briefly in this video that are explained further in much more detail in the Concept Index video. These are marked with a blue star with CI in the middle. Should you want any further information or have any questions on anything covered in this webinar, you can book on to one of our Q&A conferences. This webinar will cover the following topics: expectations of schools in relation to wellbeing, the importance of relationships, key values for whole school and a stick of rock analogy, a model for integrating emotional wellbeing themes throughout your whole school, policies into practice or practice into policies, which direction will your journey take, looking after your staff team, and the role of the mental health lead in your school and the school wellbeing service. If you see this symbol, the speech bubble with activity in the middle, please pause the video if you wish to take time to do the suggested activity or reflection. We will tell you the right time to pause. Also, ensure you are being kind to yourself while watching this video. Be aware of your emotions and how you're feeling throughout. If at any time you feel like you need to take a break or a pause, please do so. If you feel the need, seek support from a friend or a colleague or a family member. Or if you'd like to seek further support, there is information on the final slide of how you can do so.
A question that you might get asked or you might ask of yourself is how the WER programme can help your school or college to achieve a whole school approach to wellbeing. And here are some ideas about how it can do that. We've really thought about how we can use these resources and produce these resources for you to use to accompany your journey as a school or college, and to build on the good practice and the excellent work that's already going on in Thurrock schools around the promotion of wellbeing and positive mental health. We've listened to feedback from schools and school staff about what can help them, particularly in the current climate. We know that schools are keen to be supported and to have professionals to support them and their school staff and their systems. But increasingly, it's also very difficult for schools to consider training sessions when staff are doing various things during the day. It's difficult to get all of the staff together. So we've designed these for staff to use and access flexibly, for you to be able to watch the presentations or the videos as and when you can, and to be able to revisit them as needed. We're hoping these will be a starting point for a set of resources that we can build on over time and contribute to. It'd be great to add to our resources some practical examples of how schools in Thurrock are putting these ideas into practice, and that would be really excellent for us to be able to grow the resources on the WER programme site.
So these next few slides are looking at various ways in which the importance of emotional wellbeing, mental health and strong healthy relationships are interwoven throughout the Ofsted Framework 2019. So we're also going to look at some other key government documents and the NICE guidelines as well. Please take the time to read through this quote also from the Ofsted framework, just outlining the importance of ensuring that mental health and well-being is included in the curriculum as well. So again, looking at the DfE's Mental Health and Behaviour in Schools document from 2018, this is discussing again the important role that schools have to play in supporting the mental health and well-being of children by developing their whole school approaches tailored to the particular needs. It also looks at building their resilience, so using the whole school approach to develop resilience in order to support, again, good mental health and well-being. So it's really important to incorporate whole school approach in order to really get that universal approach to mental health and well-being, to ensure that you're covering every student in that school, not just the students who necessarily need support because they may be experiencing poor mental health or well-being. It's about promoting positive well-being in every single person in the school and ensuring that you have also the facility there to support them should they need it. This includes the staff as well.
These 5 key principles of recovery are very well used and really are integral to many of the themes and the content within the WER programme. So these 5 key principles of recovery we'll be revisiting and coming back to time and time again. The 5 principles of recovery look at different areas in which schools can respond to the challenges posed by COVID-19, the pandemic. And we want to put emotional well-being first for everybody. I know there's been lots of talks about how we will help children and people to catch up, what will happen about really significant events, experiences that they've lost in their learning, things like that. But the first step is around thinking about emotional well-being first. Secondly, it's about thinking about reaffirming the school's strengths and core values, and we'll talk a lot about core values and mindset throughout the WER programme. We want to place relationships front and centre because we know the healing quality of relationships, the way in which we get our basic human needs met through our relationships and our connections with others, and the importance of having a support network around us of people that we can rely on and seek out for support and fun and friendship, and how important that is to have that connectedness within schools. It's important for us to reaffirm for children, young people, for families, for staff, our safety, our routines, our boundaries. Things like this make us feel better, they make us feel secure, and they give us a structure and a guideline for how we need to behave when everything else seems to be going a little awry or being quite unpredictable. Having things that are predictable really help us to feel more settled. And it's really important to acknowledge the loss and changes that have happened and ongoing changes. Educational staff have been incredibly fluid and flexible in responding to these really sudden changes that have happened moment by moment throughout this pandemic. And they've really, just got on with it in terms of, thinking about what we need to do today, what we need to do for the children and young people, what we need to do for one another, what we do to support our school community, and have just got on with that. But it's really important to acknowledge those things and how much toll that can take on people and actually think about looking after people, which brings us nicely back to the first point again about coming back to the emotional well-being and put that first for everybody. So these 5 key principles of recovery work together to support our resilience, they enhance our well-being, they help us to think about who might need more support and to help us to support one another at the same time.
So this slide is the first slide of the section of this webinar where we're going to be looking at relationships and the importance of building relationships and how helpful they are for emotional support. So if we think to times where we may talk to a friend, a parent, a partner, when we're not feeling great, or even just when you may not realise you're not feeling great, just having those conversations, those connections with these people will always make you feel better. So it's the idea that it's not always about going to therapy to make yourself feel better. It's about doing those things that are therapeutic and being able to have a relationship with someone where you can be honest, open, kind, trusting. That is what's therapeutic, and relationships are one of the best thought forms of therapeutic support. So it's really important to really think about how can you build these relationships in your whole school approach. Relationships among staff, among students, among parents, and those are interlinking. So thinking of trusting relationships between staff and students, trusting relationships between staff and their leadership, trusting relationships between parents and staff as well. All these things are really important, as I say, in terms of emotional support within schools. So we're going to look at some of the theory behind what makes relationships so important and so pivotal in building resilience and personal growth. It's the idea that every interaction is an intervention. So we learn through interactions and relationships. So mirroring, we learn through example and modelling. So interactions enable our basic needs to be met. Repeated experiences become habits. These become wired in our brains, and this cycle increases the chances of us repeating these habits. These habits and wiring can improve and support resilience and well-being. So some of these concepts, for example, looking at basic needs, if you want to know a little bit more about those, they are in our staff wellbeing webinar, and you can also find them in our concept index. So when we're thinking about trying to change behaviours and change attitudes, maybe change people's feelings, emotions, etc., we don't look at changing the person. So it's the same as with a flower or a plant, as it's seen in this slide. If you want a plant to grow better, you don't change the plant, you change its environments. You might use a different soil, you might choose a fertiliser, you might put it somewhere in more sun, you might use more water, for example. This is the same with our young people, and not even say young people, with anybody. If you want to change their outlook, their behaviour, their effort levels, it could be their emotion. If you want them to be happier, for example, you don't change them, you need to change their environment. And we do that, we start that with relationships. So for example, you need to know that child and that student or that person to know how they're going to work best. You need to know what's going on for them so you know what to change. And for them to feel like they can cope with that change, there needs to be trust. So trust is really, really important. For them to go along with these changes, they need to trust that it's being done for the right reasons. Again, that comes through relationships. Lots of interactions build trust. If you're able to do that and make these changes for that young person, you can provide safety, trust, as I just spoke about, and learning. So you're creating the optimal environment for them to learn and be happy and healthy.
When thinking about values within your school, it's quite likely that you already have some already established. And in having your whole school approach to wellbeing, there may be some possible mindset shifts that you may need to think about as a whole school. And we have 3 sets of values that we promote, adapted from the work of Beacon House and Essex's trauma perceptive practice approach, that we're going to talk through with you now. So the first one is compassion and kindness rather than shame and blame. And the reason why we want to promote compassion and kindness is around based on the research and evidence of behaviour being a communication, and that it's needs led, and that when children, young people behave in certain ways, it's often as a response to stress or distress and feeling overwhelmed, and that behaviours are an indication of someone trying to cope with something that they're faced with. So within this mindset, solutions to problems are worked through using relational approaches. And there still may be consequences to behaviours, but they would be less emphasis or no emphasis on punitive approaches, because punitive approaches are more likely to shame and blame, and they don't actually have any founded research in changing behaviour. Secondly, we would advocate the idea and value of hope and the mindset shift away from hopelessness, talking about problems, talking about deficits, things that are going wrong, things that aren't okay. Yes, we need to be aware of what's not okay. So we think about the idea of keeping one foot in pain and one foot in possibility. So we've got that balance between thinking about what's not okay, but actually where are we heading to? Where do you want to go in the future? And to be very strengths-based within our approaches. We want to be able to strengthen and build on what's working well already. And if something is working well, let's try and do more of that. The third set of values is around connection and belonging, rather than disconnection, isolation, and exclusion. Relationships are absolutely key, and relationships are fundamentally central to anything around boosting well-being and positive mental health. Our sense of belonging, having a feeling of safety, strengthens identity. It strengthens our pride in ourselves and in our personal fulfillment. We know that our basic human needs are met via the social relationships and connections that we have with others. And trauma is often a relational problem and therefore requires emotional repair via connections that we have with other people. Now, sometimes when we talk about these sets of values, questions from people can be around, well, if we adopt these values, does that mean that we have to lessen our expectations around boundaries and consequences? And, will this, if we just come kind and compassionate, does that mean that we won't be expecting young people to develop and a sense of responsibility or to respect other people? And that's absolutely not the case. We fully advocate the idea of safety for all, of having strong, firm boundaries. We know that firm boundaries help to make children and young people feel secure and to feel safe, and they are important. And we do endeavour to teach children and young people abilities and skills that help them develop their sense of responsibility and to develop their feelings of respect for themselves and for other people and for belongings and property. So there isn't a situation where you have to relinquish any of that in order to be compassionate and kind. You can be compassionate and kind and positive and strengths-based, but still have strong boundaries and a strong sense of things that you want people to be doing and being very clear on things that are not okay. And that's still very much present within these values. When we're looking at a whole school and college approach to wellbeing and mental health, we can use this model of 8 principles. And these 8 principles have been derived from research and publications by Public Health England and Children and Young People's Mental Health Coalition. You need to use this to think about how to fit it in with pre-existing frameworks that you're already familiar with within your school or college. And think about how these 8 principles can complement or work alongside or overlap with things that you've already got. So if you've been working on healthy schools, development, something like that, these 8 principles will very much complement other frameworks that you've been using. The School's Wellbeing Service uses these 8 principles as a basis for action planning with your schools. So this should be something that you are quite familiar with. Leadership and management are central and integral to everything that happens within a school. And then around the outside of that, you've got different areas such as the ethos and environment, the curriculum and teaching and learning, student voice and how you listen to children and young people and their views and actually how they're acted upon, more importantly, staff development and staff's wellbeing, identifying need and monitoring impact of interventions for those who need extra support, working with parents and carers in your wider school community, and targeted support, how you work with other agencies to think about how to make appropriate referrals and how you can work with other agencies to maximise the support that you are able to receive for your children and young people. Your values that your school have, so we're hoping to promote the idea of compassion and kindness, hope, connection and belonging, plus the 8 principles that we've just looked at. These should be evident throughout your entire school community, just like we use the analogy of a stick of rock. So if you have a stick of rock and you've got that writing that goes throughout the middle and it goes all the way through the stick of rock, and no matter where you break that rock, you can see that writing and you can see what it says, often where what seaside town you've bought your stick of rock from. If you imagine that your values and your 8 principles of a whole school approach to wellbeing were running through that stick of rock, you should be able to visit any part of your school, maybe go out to the playground, crack open that stick of rock. You should be able to see compassion and kindness, hope, connection and belonging. You should go and have a look at teachers' planning and you should see the same things, the values rippling through there. You'd be able to walk into the staff room, attend a staff meeting, go to a governor's meeting, crack open the stick of rock, walk into the canteen at lunchtime where the midday staff are preparing for supporting children and young people for their lunch. Those values will still be there. So wherever you go throughout your school community, these values should be evidenced within your practice and within your policy. And here we want to try and just lay some of the things we've been talking about on top of one another so that you can see how all of these things work together to complement and to reinforce your whole school and college approach. So we talked about the 5 key principles of recovery. We've talked about the 8 principles of a whole school approach to wellbeing and an emotionally healthy school. And these things completely tie up together. So in all of your 8 principles, on those 8 areas there, these 5 principles of recovery should also be visible and to be present and to be influencing the decisions that you make within each of those 8 principles. And here are some of the ways in which you can do that. And it's amazing to hear and listen to some examples from schools about ways in which they have been establishing whole school approach to wellbeing. Of course, there'll be many different examples of things that your school are doing, things that you're already doing, ideas that you might have to take these ideas further. Here are just some examples there. Now we're at the end of this session, it's a good time just to check in with yourself and to see how you're feeling now. As we said in the beginning, the content of the WER programme can impact on how we're thinking and feeling and how it relates to us in our everyday lives. If you've been affected by anything you have read or heard about today, please seek support, either from your own support network, and there's some ideas listed on the slide here, or from additional support networks, whether that's local services or national sources of support.
As a result of watching this webinar, if you feel like you could really benefit from seeking some emotional support or some therapeutic support, or actually if you'd just like someone to blow off a little bit of steam to, or if you'd like some advice even on maybe someone you know, or just more advice on wellbeing, you can contact our Thurrock COVID-19 Wellbeing Support Line. This is run by the Educational Psychology Service and the School Wellbeing Service. It is for parents, young people, school staff during the outbreak of coronavirus. So it's just looking at giving you any form of support around wellbeing or advice around wellbeing that you might require. The phone number is 01375 652 537, or you could contact 01375 652 558. You'll be asked to leave a voicemail message and someone from the team will get back to you. Alternatively, you could email the helpline at sws@thurrock.gov.uk. If you didn't want to use that as an option, we do have Thurrock and Brentwood Mind. They offer lots of support in terms of mental health and wellbeing. You may be able to access therapeutic support. We also have Inclusion Thurrock. This is for adults who may require therapeutic support also. And I know that they are really, really on board in terms of helping school staff at the moment. So if you would like someone to talk to for regular sessions, they would be good ideas to contact as well. If you want to learn a bit more about what options there are to you in terms of support locally in Thurrock, do make sure you watch our webinar on accessing local support, because it looks at what's available in regards to the Thurrock Thrive model, and it looks at what support might be appropriate for what kinds of needs.